The summer heat beat down on the busy downtown street as Jasmine Williams checked the time on her phone. 10:15 a.m. Perfect. The bank had been open for just over an hour, and she hoped the morning rush had died down. She tugged at the strap of her small backpack and took a deep breath before pushing through the heavy glass doors of Meridian Trust Bank. Cool air washed over her as she stepped inside. The bank was larger than she expected, with high ceilings and marble floors that made every footstep echo. Despite the early hour, almost every chair in the waiting area was filled. Men in business suits tapped impatiently on their phones. An elderly couple huddled together, reviewing paperwork. A mother tried to keep her restless toddler entertained. Jasmine adjusted her simple white blouse and brushed an invisible speck from her jeans. She hadn't dressed up for this errand. It was just a bank visit after all. In her backpack was the check from her summer internship at a tech company. $12,000, the largest amount she'd ever held in her hands. Her plan was simple: deposit the check and open a new savings account to start building her financial future. She approached the reception desk where a young man in a crisp bank uniform greeted her with a rehearsed smile. "Welcome to Meridian Trust. How can we help you today?" he asked, his eyes already drifting to the customer entering behind her. "I need to deposit a check and open a new account," Jasmine replied. The receptionist handed her a number ticket without looking up. "Please take a seat. Your number will be called when a financial advisor is available." Jasmine glanced at her ticket, number 43. The digital display above the teller stations showed they were currently serving number 36. She found an empty seat near the back wall, settled in, and pulled out her phone. As she waited, Jasmine scrolled through the bank's app, researching their savings account options. Her finance professor had emphasized the importance of understanding terms and interest rates before signing anything. She had already compared Meridian Trust's offerings with other banks, but her father had always spoken highly of this institution's customer service and security. That recommendation meant something to her, even if she never mentioned her connection. She watched as numbers ticked by on the display. 37, 38. The bank operated with mechanical precision. Each customer spent almost exactly 7 minutes with their assigned advisor. Jasmine observed the interactions, noting how some customers received warm smiles and handshakes, while others got only brief, functional exchanges. An older black man finished his transaction and walked past her toward the exit. He gave her a slight nod of acknowledgement, which she returned. A small moment of connection in the sterile bank atmosphere. Number 42 was called, and Jasmine gathered her things. She double-checked that she had her ID, the check carefully tucked in her wallet, and the notes she'd made about account options. As a business major, she took pride in being prepared. The electronic voice announced number 43 and directed her to desk number 5. Jasmine stood smoothed to jeans and walked confidently across the marble floor. She felt a flutter of excitement. This was a small but significant step toward financial independence. Behind desk 5 sat Patricia Harmon, a middle-aged woman with streaked blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. A golden nameplate declared her position as Senior Account Manager. She was finishing some notes on her computer and didn't look up as Jasmine approached. "Good morning," Jasmine said, waiting for the advisor to acknowledge her. Patricia finally glanced up, her professional smile freezing slightly as she took in the young black woman standing before her desk. She gave Jasmine a quick once-over, noting her casual attire and backpack. "Please sit down," Patricia said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "What brings you to Meridian Trust today?" As Jasmine settled into the chair, she had no idea that this routine bank visit was about to become anything but ordinary. Jasmine placed her ID and the check on Patricia's desk. "I'd like to deposit this check and open a savings account," she explained, her voice clear and confident. Patricia picked up Jasmine's driver's license, holding it at arm's length as if examining a suspicious document. "Williams," she read aloud, her eyes darting between the ID photo and Jasmine's face. She typed something into her computer, the clicking of her manicured nails against the keyboard filling the awkward silence. "And how may I help you today?" Patricia asked, as if Jasmine hadn't just told her. "I'd like to deposit this check," Jasmine repeated patiently, sliding the folded check across the desk. "And I'm interested in opening a high-yield savings account." Patricia unfolded the check, and her eyebrows shot up when she saw the amount. She looked at Jasmine again, this time with open skepticism. The $12,000 check seemed to have triggered something in her demeanor. "That's quite a large sum," Patricia remarked, her tone shifting from professional to suspicious. "Where did you say these funds came from?" "I didn't say," Jasmine replied calmly. "But it's from my summer internship at Horizon Tech. I can show you the pay stub if needed." Patricia pursed her lips. "And you want to open an account here? At this branch specifically?" Jasmine nodded. "Yes, I've researched your savings options online. The Premier Savings account seems to offer the best interest rate." "The Premier account," Patricia echoed, tapping her pen against her desk. "That's typically for our more established clients. Perhaps the basic savings would be more appropriate for someone in your situation." The basic savings account had a significantly lower interest rate and higher fees, something Jasmine knew from her research. "I meet all the requirements for the Premier account," she stated. "The minimum deposit is $10,000, which my check covers." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "You know, there's another branch across town, near the community college. They might be more familiar with handling student accounts." A middle-aged white couple at the next desk over was being offered complimentary coffee by their advisor. The man was describing a recent boat purchase, while his advisor laughed appreciatively. Neither had shown any proof of income or been questioned about their funds. "I'd prefer to open my account here today," Jasmine insisted politely. Patricia's smile tightened. "Well, we have certain protocols for unusual transactions. This is quite a large check for someone your age." Jasmine felt her face grow warm. "Is it your standard practice to question the source of funds for all customers, or just certain ones?" Instead of answering, Patricia stood up. "One moment, please. I need to consult with my supervisor." As Patricia walked away, Jasmine noticed several people at nearby desks glancing in her direction. The whispers had already started. She sat up straighter, determined not to show how uncomfortable she felt. A few minutes later, Patricia returned with an older man in an expensive suit. His name tag read Michael Reynolds, branch manager. His forced smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Williams, I understand you wish to open an account with us," he said, taking Patricia's seat. "I'm told you have a rather large check you'd like to deposit." "Yes," Jasmine replied, "and I'd like to open a Premier Savings account." Michael glanced at the check again and then at Jasmine's casual clothes. "I see. And this money is from?" "My internship," Jasmine repeated. "As I already explained to Ms. Harmon." Right, Michael nodded slowly. "Well, you understand we have to be careful these days. Banking regulations require us to verify funds, especially when they seem unusual." By now, the bank had grown quieter. People were openly watching the interaction. An elderly woman at the next desk whispered something to her advisor, who shook his head slightly. "I understand security concerns," Jasmine said, "but what exactly seems unusual about my transaction?" Michael cleared his throat. "Well, someone of your background, with such a substantial check. We need to place a 2-week hold on these funds. Bank policy," he added quickly. "My background?" Jasmine questioned, her voice steady despite the churning feeling in her stomach. "Your age, I mean," Michael corrected, though his eyes said otherwise. "Young people don't typically have access to this kind of money. We need to ensure everything is legitimate." The humiliation burned in Jasmine's chest as Michael continued explaining banking procedures to her in a condescending tone, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. This wasn't about her age or the check. They both knew exactly what this was about. The bank lobby had grown uncomfortably quiet. Where moments before there had been the gentle hum of conversations and the clicking of keyboards, now there was a tense silence broken only by the occasional cough or shuffling of papers. All eyes seemed focused on Jasmine's desk, where Michael continued his lecture. "Young lady, when we see unusual activity, we have a responsibility to our shareholders to investigate," Michael said, his voice carrying across the open space. "It's nothing personal." But it felt intensely personal to Jasmine. Her hands, folded neatly in her lap, tightened until her knuckles paled. She had practiced for this day, mentally rehearsing how she would conduct herself during her first major banking transaction. Nowhere in those imagined scenarios had she prepared for public humiliation. Could we perhaps continue this conversation somewhere private? Jasmine asked quietly. Michael waved his hand dismissively. There's nothing to be ashamed of if everything is legitimate. Now, we'll need to fill out some additional paperwork for transactions of this nature. He pulled out a thick stack of forms and slid them across the desk. These need to be completed in full. Jasmine glanced at the forms. Unusual activity report was printed at the top of the first page, followed by sections asking for employment history, references, and source of funds, information not requested of other customers she'd observed. Is this standard procedure for all customers depositing checks over $10,000? She asked, her voice remarkably steady. Banking regulations are complicated, Patricia cut in with a patronizing smile. Perhaps we should explain how banking works. She spoke slowly, as if Jasmine might have trouble understanding basic concepts. When money comes into our bank, we need to know where it came from. Some people try to use banks for illegal things. A woman at a nearby desk looked up, frowning at Patricia's tone. An older gentleman waiting in line shook his head slightly. I understand anti-money laundering regulations, Jasmine replied. I'm a business major with a focus on finance. What I'm asking is whether you require this level of documentation from everyone. Michael's smile tightened. Let's not make this difficult. Young people often don't understand the seriousness of financial matters. Just last week, we had someone your age try to deposit a fraudulent check. What does that have to do with me? Jasmine asked. Nothing specifically, Michael said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But when someone young comes in with a large sum, it raises flags, especially when they can't adequately explain where the money came from. I explained it came from my internship, Jasmine countered, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself. She took a deep breath. I have the pay stub in my email if you need verification. That won't be necessary yet, Michael said. First, we'll place a 2-week hold on these funds while we conduct our standard verification process. He emphasized the word standard while avoiding Jasmine's direct question about whether this was indeed standard for all customers. By now, the bank tellers had stopped pretending to work. One whispered something to another, both glancing repeatedly at Jasmine. A security guard near the entrance had shifted position, moving slightly closer to her desk. I'd like to speak with someone else, Jasmine said firmly. I am the branch manager, Michael replied, his tone hardening. There's no one else to speak with. Now, if you want to open an account with us, you'll need to follow our procedures. Patricia stood beside him, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. I understand you're young and probably haven't had much experience with financial institutions, Michael continued, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. But these procedures exist for a reason. When someone like you comes in with this kind of money, we have questions. Someone like me? Jasmine repeated, her cheeks burning with a mix of embarrassment and anger. Michael seemed to realize his mistake. Someone your age, he corrected quickly. Young people rarely have legitimate access to these amounts. An older woman waiting nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. She met Jasmine's eyes briefly, a look of sympathy crossing her face. Jasmine's throat tightened as she fought to maintain her composure. This was supposed to be a simple transaction, a proud moment marking her first step toward financial independence. Instead, it had turned into a public interrogation, with every word and glance making it clear that in their eyes she didn't belong here. Just as Michael began explaining the responsibilities of adulthood to her, the frosted glass door at the back of the bank opened. A tall man in an impeccably tailored navy suit stepped through the frosted glass door at the back of the bank. Thomas Chen, the regional director, rarely emerged from his office during regular business hours. His presence on the main floor immediately caught the attention of the staff. Patricia straightened her posture. Michael's lecture trailed off mid-sentence. Mr. Chen paused, surveying the unusually quiet lobby. His gaze swept across the room until it landed on Michael standing over Jasmine. Curiosity flickered across his face as he approached. Is everything all right over here? He asked, his deep voice carrying a note of authority that made Michael step back slightly. Just handling a routine verification, sir, Michael replied quickly. Nothing to worry about. Mr. Chen glanced at the stack of forms on the desk. then at Jasmine, who sat with her back straight and her expression composed despite the flush in her cheeks. His eyes narrowed slightly, then widened in recognition. "Ms. Williams," he said, surprise evident in his voice. Jasmine looked up, relief washing over her face as she recognized the regional director. "Mr. Chen, hello." The change in the atmosphere was immediate and palpable. Patricia's smug expression dissolved. Michael's confident stance faltered. "I had no idea you were coming in today," Mr. Chen continued, his professional demeanor warming considerably. "Your father mentioned you were back from university, but he didn't say you'd be visiting our branch." Michael's face went slack. Patricia's fingers gripped the edge of the desk. "Your father," Michael repeated weakly. Mr. Chen turned to Michael with a puzzled expression. "Yes, Robert Williams. I trust you've been providing his daughter with our premier service." He looked back at Jasmine. "How is your father? I hope he enjoyed his business trip to London last week. The board meeting wasn't the same without him." The color drained from Michael's face so rapidly that he seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds. Patricia's mouth opened and closed without producing any sound. The stack of unusual activity forms suddenly looked absurd between them. "The board meeting?" Patricia finally managed to whisper. "Of course," Mr. Chen replied as if it were common knowledge. "Ms. Williams' father is our majority shareholder." He turned back to Jasmine with a look of growing concern. "Is there a problem with your transaction today?" The silence in the bank was deafening. Even the security guard by the door seemed to be holding his breath. The elderly woman who had given Jasmine a sympathetic look earlier now had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. "There seems to be some confusion about my check," Jasmine explained calmly. "Mr. Reynolds was explaining that young people like me rarely have legitimate access to this kind of money." Mr. Chen's friendly expression cooled instantly. He looked at the check on the desk, then at the unusual activity forms, and finally at Michael, whose face had turned from white to gray. "I see," Mr. Chen said quietly. The two simple words carried the weight of an avalanche. "I was also told I should try the branch near the community college instead," Jasmine added, her voice steady. "Ms. Harmon thought they might be more familiar with handling someone like me." Patricia took a small step backward, as if trying to physically distance herself from her own words. "Ms. Williams," Mr. Chen said, his voice formal but kind, "please accept my personal apologies for any inconvenience. Would you mind joining me in my office? I'd be happy to handle your transaction personally." Jasmine gathered her ID and check from the desk. As she stood, she noticed several employees frantically typing at their computers, likely searching for information about Robert Williams. A teller was whispering urgently to her colleague, pointing discreetly at a photo on her screen. "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Jasmine replied. "I appreciate it." As Mr. Chen led her toward his office, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your father is one of our most valued board members. He'll be very interested to hear about your experience today." Behind them, Michael collapsed into Patricia's chair, loosening his tie with trembling fingers. Patricia stood frozen in place, her face a mask of horror as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The whispers around the bank grew louder as customers and employees alike realized what they had witnessed. The daughter of Robert Williams, the bank's owner, had just been humiliated by staff who had no idea who she was. The glass walls of Mr. Chen's office offered no privacy from the curious eyes that followed Jasmine across the bank floor. Inside, she sat in a plush leather chair while Mr. Chen closed the door and settled behind his large mahogany desk. "Ms. Williams, I can't begin to express how deeply troubled I am by what I just witnessed," he said, his voice gentle but serious. "Would you mind telling me exactly what happened?" Jasmine recounted her experience calmly, from Patricia's initial dismissive attitude to Michael's public interrogation. As she spoke, Mr. Chen's expression darkened. "This is completely unacceptable," he said when she finished. "I want you to know that this is not how Meridian Trust operates, or at least, not how we're supposed to operate." He hesitated. "May I ask why you didn't mention who your father is?" Jasmine smiled slightly. "I wanted to be treated like any other customer. Dad always taught me that a person's character should speak for itself." Mr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "A valuable lesson. Unfortunately, it seems some of our staff failed that test today." He picked up his phone. "Would you excuse me for a moment? I need to make a few calls." Through the glass walls, Jasmine could see the aftermath of her revelation unfolding like a silent movie. Michael remained slumped in Patricia's chair, looking as though he might be sick. Patricia stood by the water cooler, speaking rapidly into her cell phone, her free hand gesturing frantically. Other employees huddled in small groups, throwing occasional glances toward Mr. Chen's office. On the customer side of the bank, the elderly woman who had given Jasmine a sympathetic look earlier caught her eye and gave a small nod of approval. A young man waiting in line was explaining what had happened to a new arrival, gesturing toward Jasmine with an expression of amazement. In the office, Mr. Chen spoke in hushed tones on the phone. "Yes, she's here right now." No, they had no idea. Completely inappropriate treatment. "Yes, I understand the sensitivity." Of course, right away. He'd hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Lisa, cancel my next 2 appointments." "Yes, it's an emergency situation." "Thank you." Outside, a new flurry of activity began. The head teller was rushing from station to station, speaking urgently to each employee. A woman in a tailored suit, someone Jasmine hadn't noticed before, emerged from a side office and made a beeline for Michael, who stood up shakily as she approached. Mr. Chen finished his calls and turned back to Jasmine. "Ms. Williams, I've spoken with our head of human resources and our legal team. They're on their way here now. I've also left a message for your father, though I imagine you'll want to speak with him personally about this." "I appreciate that," Jasmine said, "but I don't want anyone fired over this." Mr. Chen looked surprised. "That's very generous of you, but what happened today was a serious violation of our policies." "I understand," Jasmine replied, "but firing them won't solve the real problem, will it? If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. Someone without a father on the board." Before Mr. Chen could respond, a tap on the door interrupted them. A woman with silver-streaked hair and a leather portfolio entered. "Ms. Williams, I'm Beverly Thompson, head of human resources," she said, extending her hand. "I understand there was an unfortunate incident today. I want to assure you we're taking this very seriously." Behind Beverly, another tap on the glass revealed a man in his 60s carrying a briefcase. The bank's legal counsel had arrived. Within minutes, Mr. Chen's office became the center of an impromptu emergency meeting. Through the glass walls, Patricia watched the gathering with growing horror. The stack of unusual activity forms still sat on her desk, denning evidence of the special scrutiny she had subjected Jasmine to. When the bank's senior leadership began filing into Mr. Chen's office, she sank into her chair, her face ashen. Michael stood outside the office door, his tie askew, sweat beading on his forehead as he waited to be called in. Every few seconds, he glanced at his watch, then at the phone, as if calculating how quickly this news would reach Robert Williams. Inside the office, Jasmine sat calmly at the center of the storm she had inadvertently created, watching as the bank's most senior employees scrambled to address the situation. She felt no satisfaction in their panic, only a sad confirmation of what she had always suspected. Her treatment today had not been an isolated incident, but a symptom of a much deeper problem. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Mr. Chen's office as Jasmine opened her notebook. The bank executives seated around her watched with surprise as she pulled out several handwritten pages of notes. "Before we discuss what happened to me today," Jasmine began, her voice steady, "I'd like to share something else." She slid the notebook toward Mr. Chen. "These are experiences reported by friends and classmates at similar financial institutions over the past year." Mr. Chen adjusted his glasses and began reading. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he turned each page. "May I?" Beverly asked, reaching for the notebook. As the Human Resources Director read through Jasmine's notes, she began making her own, her pen moving quickly across her legal pad. "This isn't just about today," Jasmine explained to the silent room. "What happened to me isn't unique. It's just that most people don't have a direct line to the regional director." The legal counsel, who had been reviewing documents on his tablet, looked up. "You've documented these incidents very thoroughly," he observed. "Dates, times, specific comments made by staff. This is concerning." "I'm studying business with a focus on organizational ethics," Jasmine explained. These patterns became obvious once I started paying attention. Outside the glass walls, normal banking operations had all but ceased. Employees moved through their tasks mechanically, their attention repeatedly drawn to the meeting in progress. Patricia had been called into a separate office with the compliance officer, her usual confidence replaced by nervous gestures as she appeared to be explaining herself. Michael paced near the break room, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke urgently to someone. From his expressions and frequent glances toward the meeting, he seemed to be seeking advice, or perhaps preparing his resume. Back in Mr. Chen's office, Jasmine's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen. "It's my father," she said, rising from her chair. "I should take this." "Of course," Mr. Chen replied, gesturing toward a small connected meeting room for privacy. As Jasmine stepped away to answer the call, Beverly leaned across the table. "We have a serious situation here," she whispered to Mr. Chen. "If even half of these documented incidents are accurate, we're looking at a pattern of discriminatory practices." Mr. Chen nodded grimly. "And if Robert Williams' daughter was treated this way in our flagship branch, imagine how others without her connections are being treated." In the small meeting room, Jasmine spoke calmly to her father. "Dad, I'm fine, really. No, you don't need to come down here." "They're taking it seriously." "Actually, I have some ideas about how to address this." Through the glass, the executives could see her gesturing as she outlined something to her father. Her expression was animated, passionate. When she mentioned something specific, she pointed back toward her notebook on the conference table. After a few minutes, Jasmine returned, looking determined. "My father will be calling you directly," she told Mr. Chen. "But I want to be clear about something. I don't want special treatment, and I don't want revenge. What I want is change." The executives exchanged glances. "What kind of change, Ms. Williams?" asked the legal counsel cautiously. "Meaningful, long-term change," Jasmine replied. She sat down and pulled her notebook back, flipping to a fresh page. "I've been thinking about this since the incident began. What happened today is an opportunity. A chance to identify and address the biases that affect how your bank treats certain customers." She began writing on the blank page, creating a list as she spoke. "First, we need data, anonymous audits of customer experiences across all branches, broken down by demographics. Second, we need comprehensive training, not just a one-day sensitivity seminar. Third, we need accountability. Clear consequences for discriminatory behavior and rewards for inclusive practices." The executives watched with growing respect as this young woman, who had every right to be angry and demanding punishments, instead methodically outlined a path toward institutional improvement. "I have one semester left before I graduate," Jasmine continued. "I'd like to propose using this situation as the foundation for my senior project, working with Meridian Trust to develop and implement these changes." Mr. Chen leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "You're not what I expected, Ms. Williams." Jasmine smiled slightly. "I get that a lot." Outside, as word spread about what was happening in the meeting, the atmosphere in the bank shifted. What had begun as panic over potential firings and lawsuits was evolving into something else, a dawning realization that this incident might lead to genuine change rather than just punishment. 3 months later, Jasmine stood in the back of the same bank branch, watching as employees gathered for the morning meeting. The space had been transformed. Gone were the imposing desks that created barriers between bankers and customers. In their place stood modern, open workstations designed to feel welcoming rather than intimidating. Mr. Chen nodded to Jasmine from across the room before addressing his staff. "Today marks an important milestone for Meridian Trust," he announced. "The customer experience program that began 3 months ago is now being implemented across all 57 of our branches." Jasmine felt a small surge of pride. What had started as a humiliating experience had blossomed into something she never expected: real change. After the incident, Robert Williams had indeed called an emergency board meeting. But instead of demanding firings, he had backed his daughter's proposal for institutional reform. With his support and Jasmine's insights, Meridian Trust had launched a comprehensive overhaul of its customer service practices. "I'd like to introduce the team that made this possible," Mr. Chen continued. Many of you already know Jasmine Williams, who has been working with us as part of her university internship. Heads turned toward Jasmine, and a few employees applauded. Most of them knew her story by now, the bank owner's daughter who had been discriminated against in their very lobby, who had then turned that experience into a catalyst for change rather than punishment. And now, Mr. Chen said, gesturing toward the front of the room, our newly appointed diversity and inclusion coordinators will outline the next phase of our training program. To Jasmine's surprise, Patricia stepped forward. The former senior account manager looked different, humbler, more thoughtful. Beside her stood Michael, who now wore a name tag identifying him as training specialist rather than branch manager. After the incident, neither Patricia nor Michael had been fired. Instead, they had been given a choice: resign or become part of the solution. Both had chosen the latter path, though not without significant consequences. They had been demoted, required to undergo extensive training, and tasked with helping implement the very reforms their behavior had made necessary. "Good morning," Patricia began, her voice carrying a sincerity that had been absent during her first encounter with Jasmine. "Today we're introducing standardized service protocols that will ensure every customer receives the same respectful treatment regardless of their appearance, age, or background." Michael nodded and added, "We've developed these protocols based on 3 months of data collection across all branches, identifying where and how bias affects our customer interactions." Jasmine listened as they outlined the changes: transparent requirements for opening accounts, standardized documentation for loans, and regular mystery shopper testing to ensure compliance. What impressed her most was how they spoke about these changes not as burdensome rules, but as opportunities to better serve their community. After the meeting, Patricia approached Jasmine by the coffee station. "I never properly apologized to you," she said quietly. "What I did that day, there's no excuse for it." Jasmine poured herself a cup of coffee. "You're right, there isn't," she agreed. "But you've put in real work these past few months. That counts for something." Patricia nodded. "When Mr. Chen first suggested this role instead of firing me, I thought it was a punishment. Now I realize it was a chance to become better, not just at my job, but as a person." Across the lobby, a young black man entered the bank. Jasmine watched as a teller greeted him warmly and directed him to an available banker. There was no scrutiny, no sideways glances, just professional service delivered with respect. Later that afternoon, Jasmine sat with her father in his downtown office, finalizing her internship report. "Impressive work," Robert said, turning the page of her presentation. The board was particularly interested in the data on customer retention. "Turns out treating people with respect is actually good for business." Jasmine smiled. "Who would have thought?" "You know," Robert said, leaning back in his chair, "when you first told me what happened that day, I was ready to clean house, fire everyone involved, maybe even close that branch." "I'm glad you stopped me." "Firing them would have been easy," Jasmine replied. "But it wouldn't have changed anything. The next Patricia or Michael would have done the same thing at a different branch." Robert nodded proudly. "Instead, you've changed the system. That's harder, but it matters more." As Jasmine packed up her materials, she paused at the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, someone was walking into a Meridian Trust branch today and being treated with dignity because of changes she had helped create. The thought filled her with a quiet satisfaction far more powerful than any revenge could have offered.